Hey heroes, welcome to another chilling episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for $1 per month over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find me. Scarecrows. For generations, humans have used these straw-filled mannequins to frighten away birds from fields of crops. But in the dead of night, the sight of such a thing standing beneath the moonlight can be an eerie sight, especially if one were to see a straw man move. And so this week we're looking at individuals in the Marvel Universe, two in particular, who carry the visage of a scarecrow, one for evil and one, ostensibly, for good. But first, the earliest recorded instance of someone using the name was a criminal who was active on the American frontier in the late 19th century. While the moniker of this particular scarecrow was more figurative than literal, he and his gang used intimidation and murder to take advantage of frightened ranchers for big profits. However, he ultimately met his own end in an encounter with the gun-slinging outlaw known as Kid Colt. Since then, there have been some reports of actual straw scarecrows coming to life. In one incident, a scarecrow somehow became both intelligent and animated after being struck by lightning. In the midst of a thunderstorm, this friendly straw man wanted to use his newly acquired life to finally interact with others. However, the first people he encountered ran away in terror at the walking scarecrow. He also soon discovered that the life force he'd been mysteriously endowed with was temporary and quickly draining. Meanwhile, the storm threatened the nearby village as the dam overlooking the valley began to leak. In the end, this scarecrow used the last of his energy to sacrifice himself by plugging the hole with his own body, thus saving the valley. Another living scarecrow appeared sometime later during the Age of Monsters. This was a time period just before the Marvel Age of Heroes in which supernatural phenomena and alien invaders were relatively common occurrences, but without an abundance of costumed superheroes to combat them. One incident during this time occurred in New Mexico after an old couple, Albert and Martha Smith, were forced off their failing farmstead by the unscrupulous land baron Jarvis Cragstone. Without enough money to start another farm elsewhere, they reluctantly left behind a reliable old scarecrow that they'd used for years. Meanwhile, Cragstone sold the land to the government for a tidy profit so it could be used for nuclear testing. Through some twist of fate, the delta rays produced by an experimental bomb affected the Scarecrow. This caused it not only to come to life, but to grow in size several times over until it was as large as a building. Somehow granted awareness of the situation, the giant straw man lumbered into the city and attacked the offices of Jarvis Cragstone. Like the previous one we mentioned, this scarecrow's life force was also limited, but before it ran out, it successfully claimed the money Cragstone had gotten from his sale of the land and left it for the Smiths to find. Interestingly, among the many people to witness this living scarecrow were a pair identified only as Johnny and Sue. While this could certainly be a coincidence, it wasn't long after this incident that the siblings, Jonathan and Susan Storm, gained uncanny abilities alongside Reed Richards and Ben Grimm, founded the Fantastic Four, and helped usher in the Marvel Age of Heroes. Funnily enough, the foursome brought an end to the Age of Monsters when they worked to capture many of the giant creatures who were still on the loose at the time, confining them to an island in the North Pacific, Monster Isle. But with an age of superheroes also came an influx of super villains, including one who adopted the visage of the Scarecrow, Ebenezer Laughton. Now, Laughton's upbringing was a twisted one. Born in Rhinebeck, New York, his father was a performer in what is known as a geek show, a circus act in which the players engage in distasteful or disgusting behavior to elicit a reaction from the audience. Ebenezer's mother, meanwhile, was an abusive alcoholic. When Laughton was young, he and his family lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. However, his mother was often out of the house, and it's heavily implied that she cheated on his father with multiple men. And when his father attempted to confront her about this, she stabbed him in the arm with a kitchen knife. After that, Laughton's father spent much of his time alone in his office crying to himself. While Ebenezer loved his mother and did his best to please her, she abused him as well, sometimes even burning his skin with lit cigarettes. She would often feel guilty after the fact and tried to absolve herself by giving her son gifts. This ultimately gave Laughton the unhealthy expectation of being rewarded for actively seeking punishment. Emotionally stunted and socially awkward, he began torturing and killing small animals in an attempt to find out how they work. This also served to garner his mother's attention as she warned him repeatedly to stop doing it. But after several incidents, she verbally berated her son and broke his finger. That was the first time he used his natural flexibility to contort out of her grasp and hid in the house, but it was far from the last time. When his parents finally divorced, Laughton was brought to Rhinebeck with his father, where he lived on a farm. However, unable to face the truth about the mother that he still loved so much, he repressed what happened and transferred the blame of it onto his father. We also know that Ebenezer had a brother named Ralph Laughton, but nothing has really been said about where he was during Ebenezer's upbringing. It seems that at some point the Laughton's parents passed away, but as far as I can tell, the circumstances of their deaths are undocumented. And at some point, Ebenezer Laughton saw a talented contortionist at a traveling carnival, and remembering on some level how he used similar skills to evade his mother, sought to perfect those abilities. Learning to twist his body into various unusual positions, he displayed feats of contortionism, escape artistry, and acrobatics as part of a live variety show under the stage name Umberto the Uncanny. For several months, another who performed on this same bill was a man named Thornton, who dazzled audiences with a murder of highly trained crows. Then, during one show, a criminal attempted to rob the box office while the superhero Iron Man just happened to be flying overhead. In an attempt to increase his own celebrity status, Laughton rolled into the thief himself, stopping him before Iron Man did. The armored Avenger congratulated Laughton, but the twisted contortionist realized that his skills could serve him well as a burglar. He was further inspired when he saw a Scarecrow costume in a shop window and quickly stole that. Finally, he took Thornton's trained crows, who recognized him and obeyed his commands. And so Ebenezer Laughton ceased to be Umberto the Uncanny and instead became the Scarecrow. For his first criminal act, he and his birds stole secret weapon designs from Tony Stark's penthouse apartment. Tony's chauffeur, a former prize fighter named Happy Hogan, attempted to stop the Scarecrow himself. The lithe villain easily defeated his attacker, but the scuffle did give Tony Stark enough time to don his Iron Man armor. Although the Scarecrow's birds distracted the hero long enough for Laughton to escape with the stolen plans. He offered to sell them back to Stark, but during the meeting his trained crows stole the ransom money, allowing him to escape with it and the weapon designs. Firmly on Iron Man's bad side, the Scarecrow decided to flee the country and sell the stolen plans to Cuba. Of course, the Armored Avenger followed and defeated the Scarecrow by throwing him out to sea, recovering the designs from the foreign agents. Thanks to his birds, the Scarecrow evaded capture, escaping to Cuba where he plotted his next move. Now, it should be noted that in one story it was indicated that Laughton was given the Scarecrow identity by agents of Iron Man's nemesis, the Mandarin. According to this alternate version of events, Laughton had already engaged in criminal activity before he attempted his show business career. Impressed by his physical capabilities, the Mandarin's agents gave Laughton his Scarecrow costume and recruited him into the world of industrial espionage. Similar to the original story, Laughton was tasked with stealing corporate secrets from Stark Enterprises. And much like the original telling, he briefly clashed with Happy Hogan, giving Stark time to change into Iron Man. In this telling, the Scarecrow attempted to turn the stolen information over to the Mandarin's agents, but the ultimate result was the same, with him being defeated by Iron Man and thrown out to sea. Now, the original telling is still the one that is generally considered canon. However, the book this alternate telling comes from, Iron Man Enter the Mandarin, ostensibly takes place within the main Marvel universe, simply expanding on the events of the original tales. So I would describe it as potentially apocryphal, but not necessarily something that needs to be dismissed entirely out of hand. In either case, Laughton later returned to the United States using his skills and his birds to steal from high-rise apartments. He again demonstrated the reliability of his trained crows when he clashed with the vigilante Spider-Man. Although Spidey was still a teenager at the time, the Scarecrow was ultimately defeated once again. While he declined an offer to work under the Green Goblin during this time, he was subsequently hired by the Italian Magia Don Count Nefaria, head of the Nefaria crime family, alongside other costumed villains including the Unicorn, the Eel, the Porcupine, and Plant Man. Under Nefaria, this gang engaged in a scheme to hold the nation's capital ransom while framing the heroic mutant team, the X-Men. Scarecrow and the other villains attempted to betray Nefaria and claim the money for themselves, but the Unicorn abandoned them and returned to their employer alone. However, the whole scheme was ultimately foiled thanks to some psychic trickery from the X-Men founder, Professor Xavier. Scarecrow, Porcupine, Plant Man, and Eel subsequently worked under the Cowled Commander as members of the group known as Crime Wave. This time their employer was secretly a cop named Brian Muldoon, who hoped that Crime Wave would lead to public support for less regulations and restrictions for the police. In the end, Muldoon was unmasked by Captain America and the Falcon, and the members of Crime Wave were arrested, including Scarecrow. Prison life was not good for Ebenezer Laughton, and during his incarceration, his mind finally snapped. By the time he got out, he had deluded himself into believing a false version of his own past in which his father was an abusive reverend. He tracked down his brother Ralph and forced him to be his chauffeur, only referring to him as Anthony simply because he thought it was a more fitting name. The Mad Scarecrow went on a murder spree, notably targeting members of the Coalition for an Upstanding America. This politically motivated group campaigned for a return to traditional values, reminding Laughton of the false version of his father that his mind had invented. While Captain America had his own issues with the Coalition, notably their unsanctioned use of his image in their ad campaigns, he ultimately defeated the Scarecrow once again. Interestingly, this incident seems to be the only instance of the Scarecrow employing henchmen wearing similar masks to his own. After that defeat, he was confined in a specialized supervillain prison, the Vault. During the events of the Acts of Vengeance conspiracy, he participated in an attempted breakout. However, after underestimating the avenging archer Hawkeye, he was overpowered and returned to his cell. Due to his increasing insanity, Laughton was later transferred to a psychiatric facility in Queens. There, his birds were able to bring him his mask and some basic equipment, including a straight razor, allowing him to escape. Having transferred his irrational hatred of his father onto Captain America, he began killing civilians and stuffing their corpses with straw to lure the hero out. More unhinged than ever, the Scarecrow even murdered a mother and her infant with a pitchfork. This trail of violence drew the attention of the Ghost Rider Danny Ketch, who Laughton was no match for. The ensuing battle came to an end with the Scarecrow being impaled on his own weapon. Barely alive, Laughton's body was soon recovered by the enigmatic organization known as the Firm. Funded by Centurius, the man without a soul, the Firm used biogenetics and specialized implants to endow individuals with superhuman powers. And so Ebenezer Laughton was subjected to a series of surgeries under a Dr. Robert Harris. Unbeknownst to the doctors, Laughton was completely awake through these procedures, although his vocal cords had been damaged, preventing him from screaming. Right after the final surgery was complete, Laughton slipped from his bonds, obtained a scalpel, and killed the doctors. With his strength enhanced by the procedure, the Scarecrow went on another murderous rampage. Furthermore, the implants he received from the Firm endowed him with the ability to produce a mutated pheromone that induced sensory overload and panic attacks in those around him. Not only that, but the fear of others actually made him more powerful, pushing his strength, stamina, and agility to superhuman levels, and allowing him to heal from near-fatal wounds. While his crows would no longer come close to him, he also gained the ability to summon and direct much larger murmurations. In his addled state, Laughton mistook police officer Stacy Dolan for his own mother and abducted her. She was brought to his old Brooklyn brownstone and held captive there, along with many of his other victims who were eviscerated and stuffed with straw. This time his crimes caught the attention of both Captain America and Ghost Rider, who joined forces to combat him. While his new powers gave him an edge over Cap, he wasn't able to stand up to the two heroes together. When Dolan was rescued, she attempted to arrest Laughton, firing a warning shot that grazed his head. The Scarecrow tried to escape out the third-story window, but inadvertently impaled himself on a metal fence. Once again, he survived, however, and was recovered by the Firm, who patched him up and sealed him away for future use. They gave him a durable new pitchfork and apparently intended for him to lead an army of mutated creatures they'd amassed. But those schemes were ultimately fruitless as the Firm was defeated at the hands of Ghost Rider. However, the FBI inadvertently released Scarecrow and the other creatures when they opened the Firm's vaults. This time, his new pitchfork, possibly possessing some unspecified mystical properties, allowed him to actually hurt the Ghost Rider. But during their fight, the Scarecrow was gunned down by Officer Stacy Dolan. His body was dragged away by the Firm's mutated creatures, and his ability to use fear to heal allowed him to recover yet again. Sometime after that, due to the machinations of a pair of cosmic entities known as the Brothers, a number of individuals from the Earth we know, Earth 616, found themselves transported to an alternate universe so far removed from our own that it seems to be in a separate multiverse entirely. As such, we shall refer to it as the Distant Cosmos, or DC universe. Funnily enough, despite being so far away, this world has a Scarecrow of its own, a former psychology professor named Jonathan Crane, who became obsessed with the concept of fear and developed a potent chemical gas that could quickly induce terror in others. He has often clashed with the Batman, a masked hero who has been considered analogous to Nighthawk of the Squadron Supreme. Fittingly enough, when Ebenezer Laughton was transported to that Earth, he briefly joined forces with Jonathan Crane. They attempted to take noted reporter Lois Lane hostage, but she was quickly rescued by Spider-Man's clone, Ben Reilly, who had also been transported there. Although if he hadn't stepped in, the two Scarecrows would have had to instead answer to Superman, a hero with abilities comparable to that of Hyperion. When the Marvel and DC universes were subsequently fused together along with their inhabitants, the Scarecrow, who was briefly seen in that amalgam reality, was presumably a combination of both Laughton and Crane. But after reality was restored to normal, Laughton was returned to his proper Earth and plotted revenge on Ghost Rider. With his strength and healing factor powered by fear, the Scarecrow abducted dozens of victims to feed his powers. Not everyone he captured was kept alive, however, as he got the Rider's attention by clotheslining him with a rope made from human entrails. The Scarecrow lured the Ghost Rider into his so-called Scared House, a makeshift underground maze with frightened captives lining the walls. This served both to provide adequate fear for his healing factor and to limit what the Rider could do without endangering innocents. While this particular Ghost Rider was not a killer, he was still a spirit of vengeance, and stopped the villain with a gruesome punishment. Breaking the Scarecrow's arms and legs, he held the bones in place incorrectly, as his rapid healing factor caused them to fuse into malformed positions, preventing Laughton from moving. The Scarecrow was then sent to a government facility known as the Black Hole, where his bones were repeatedly broken and reset to repair the damage, but he was kept awake during the procedures. Later at that same prison, men also tried to examine a captive Danny Ketch. When Danny transformed into the Ghost Rider and broke free, causing a power outage, S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury was sent to investigate, taking several Avengers with him. To cover up the atrocities committed there, the head of the prison, a government agent known only as Spook, set the facility's nuclear power core to explode. He left Laughton to delay the Ghost Rider, but with nobody around to draw fear from, the Scarecrow was quickly defeated. However, Fury and the others were ultimately unable to prevent the detonation. While the Ghost Rider and the other heroes escaped, Ebenezer Laughton was caught in the explosion and finally killed. After that, the Scarecrow's soul was summoned to a specific hell dimension by Blackheart, the son of the devil Mephisto. Blackheart also brought Danny Ketch to hell, as well as the previous Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze, and challenged the three men to try and escape. Each would have been allowed to take one thing with them, and the Scarecrow hoped that he could ask the Devil's Son for an end to the voices in his head and constant fear. Of course, it was ultimately the Ghost Riders who escaped, leaving the Scarecrow behind. Blackheart wasn't finished with Laughton's soul, however. He offered to transform the Scarecrow into an actual demon if he could successfully possess Danny Ketch for 24 hours. Returning to Earth as a disembodied spirit, he initially inhabited the body of Dan's dead sister, Barbara, using it to terrorize the Ketch family. While he did succeed in possessing Danny for a time, the spirit of the Ghost Rider used Barbara's corpse as a host body and banished Laughton's soul back to hell. For his failure, the Scarecrow was embedded into the walls of Blackheart's flesh corridor. However, he would not remain there forever, and he was subsequently cast back to Earth once again. The exact circumstances of this resurrection are undocumented, but it's possible that his disembodied spirit was able to permanently bond with a new host body. While he has ostensibly demonstrated that he retains the ability to produce fear-generating hormones, his current capabilities have yet to be fully seen. Since returning, he has more or less gone back to his roots, operating as hired muscle, usually as part of a larger villain team. While there's not much more to discuss with Ebenezer Laughton aside from perhaps his continued involvement in various criminal organizations, there is another Scarecrow we need to talk about. This one is an enigmatic extra-dimensional entity often referred to as the Straw Man. His origins and true motivations are a mystery, although he claims to be a protector of Earth. Residing in another realm, this being has manifested on the earthly plane by inhabiting grain-stalk bodies which resemble scarecrows. These bodies are exceptionally durable but can be damaged by fire. They typically do not speak, but can produce a fear-inducing laughter capable of paralyzing those who hear it, and have also been shown to be capable of communicating telepathically. The straw man also possesses a suite of other supernatural powers, such as control over crows, plants, and the weather. Centuries prior to the Marvel Age, the straw man battled a demon named Kalu Mai and ripped off one of his horns. At some point, he sealed the portal through which Kalu Mai reached Earth behind an oil painting called the Scarecrow, which depicted the straw man holding a pair of defeated cultists. The painting had many owners over the years, but eventually wound up for auction in New York City. For context in the overall timeline, this would have been around the time that Ebenezer Laughton was serving his first prison sentence, following his stint with Crime Wave but before his insane murder sprees. A member of Kalu Mai's cult, Gregor Rovic, attempted to secure the Scarecrow painting, but a man named Dave Duncan interfered, allowing his brother Jess to win the auction. The cult subsequently stole the painting, ripping the canvas to reveal the visage of Kalu Mai underneath. They also abducted Jess Duncan's girlfriend, Harmony Maxwell, and plotted to offer her as a sacrifice. However, the straw man intervened, ostensibly using Dave Duncan as a host body to manifest on Earth as the Scarecrow. He brutally slaughtered the cultists, leaving Gregor Ruvic's broken, mangled corpse tangled in the trees he'd used to kill him. While the Scarecrow painting was restored, Kalu Mai subsequently used the gateway behind it to dispatch several night demons, tasking them with retrieving his severed horn. This was done partly through his flute-playing servant Bartolome. The straw man battled the demons, who threatened him with the one thing that could damage his physical manifestations: fire. And so this time it was Harmony Maxwell who aided the Scarecrow, snuffing out the flames with a tarp. After banishing the demons, the straw man returned to his home dimension through a sketch drawn by Jess Duncan. Wishing to investigate what was happening, Harmony and the Duncan brothers later invited the Fantastic Four member Ben Grimm to a public showing of the painting. They were able to do so through a mutual acquaintance, the blind sculptor Alicia Masters, who was dating Grimm at the time. During the show, one of the attendants fell under Kalu Mai's power and was transformed into a fiery servant who battled Grimm and the Scarecrow. During the battle, the Scarecrow tricked the possessed servant into setting the painting alight. While the painting was impervious to natural flame, the demon's mystical fire was able to destroy it, permanently closing the gateway to Kalu Mai's realm. But before it was completely gone, the Scarecrow leapt through the gateway, presumably while still inhabiting Dave Duncan's body. While the precise nature of their connection is still unclear, Dave has not been seen since then and has been presumed dead by his loved ones. Meanwhile, the Scarecrow finally ended his battle with his centuries-old foe, killing Kalu Mai once and for all. After that, he met with a cabal of other extra-dimensional entities who fed on fear, called together by the Dweller in Darkness. While most of these fear lords sought to spread terror across the Earth, the Scarecrow warned them that the planet was under his protection. He again manifested on the mortal plane, this time taking human form under the name Skira Corvus. He created a television network called Horror TV in an attempt to inoculate humanity against the Fear Lord's terror. He introduced himself to Dr. Strange as the Straw Man, preferring that name to avoid confusion with the mortal Scarecrow, and warned him about the Fear Lords. That particular incarnation was destroyed by another Fear Lord, the Lurking Unknown, who used mystical fire. However, the Straw Man had already left behind another painting through which he could return. After Strange was captured and confined in the Halls of Fear, the Straw Man manifested again and joined Daredevil, Clea, and Rintra in rescuing him, albeit at the cost of another Scarecrow body. While the Straw Man is not known to have manifested on Earth since then, he has continued to watch from afar. Furthermore, although his goals clash with that of the others, he is still considered a Fear Lord, holding the title of Lord of Fear in numinosity. In other words, fear related to spiritual or divine power. With a council of terrifying entities lurking just beyond the corners of reality, it may be comforting to think that at least one of them will act in the Earth's defense. But that's all I've got for you this week. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page, where for only $1 a month you can get your name in these special thanks here. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!